Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website at weather.gov/Alaska. You can get any updates to our forecast or check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we have out for the state. You can also call our weather info line at 1-800-472-0391. Get any updates to the forecast through that means as well. And you can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and on YouTube. Taking a quick look now, we do have two advisories that we have out for the state. The first one is a high surf advisory, and that is out for Dehne and the northeastern side of St. Lawrence Island. That is going to be out starting at 10 p.m. tonight until 1 p.m. on Thursday. Again, that is for a high surf advisory. We're going to see later that we have a lot of northerly flow pushing through the Bering Strait area, bringing in some of that higher surf. The other advisory that we have out is for the Noatak Valley, and that is from the Noatak River and areas further to the north. And that is a wind advisory that is out until 7 a.m. on Thursday morning. And there are winds possible as high as 45 miles per hour out of a northeasterly direction. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery, we'll start off in the Bering Sea. You can see a lot of the darker cloud tops there resembling warmer cloud tops, which means that they are lower clouds, and we're seeing some low stratus and fog underneath that area. As you look out further to the east, our low that we saw yesterday is now tracked up here just to the south of Kodiak, pushing in even closer to Kodiak Island. And watching this again, we'll see the old frontal system as it had pushed in over much of the main part of the state and stretching down through much of the Gulf. But as we notice, it is just off the coastline there for much of the Panhandle area, sparing a lot of the rain from that area. And then in our final run through, we'll look up along the Arctic coastline. You can still see a lot of cloud cover up there as we are seeing some rain and some snow up along the Arctic coast. So taking a look now at the remainder of today's weather, we do have that rain and snow mix up along the North Slope. And we do have, as we get out by the water there, we are seeing a lot of that mixing with fog. But as we drop down south of the Brooks Range, we're seeing more actually just rain from the upper Yukon Valley down into southwest Alaska, out through much of the south central as well, with our low that is starting to fill now, becoming a lot weaker. And we can see the old frontal system now becoming a trough there, bringing in some rain to places of the eastern Gulf, but not quite out towards the Panhandle area at this time. And we do have northerly flow over the Bering Sea, bringing in some rain to the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutian Islands. But as we push further out to the west, we have high pressure out there building in that is bringing in some more fog to areas in the central Bering down through the Aleutian Islands as well. As we move into tonight, our high pressure remains out by the western Aleutian Islands with areas of fog associated with that high extending out over the central Aleutian Islands. Some shower activity pushing down around St. Matthew Island area. But as we move up along the coastline, we're going to see more fog from St. Lawrence Island up through the Arctic coastline, and we are going to see some rain and snow up there as we get further to the north. The areas along the water are actually warmer, so we're seeing a mixture of snow and rain there, but as we get to the more interior parts of the Arctic coast, we are seeing more snow there, and that does include areas along the Brooks Range as well. But as we drop back down into the interior, we are seeing that change back over to rain, expecting rain showers. Pretty lightly, but through the central and eastern parts of the interior and south central as well. Heavier rain from our low by Kodiak Island along the North Gulf Coast, extending all the way through the Panhandle area overnight tonight as that trough pushes even closer to the Panhandle. As we move into Wednesday, going to continue to see rain for the Panhandle area with that southwesterly flow and another trough on the way, bringing even more rain there. You can see just constant southwesterly flow bringing more moisture to the area. Along the North Gulf Coast, going to continue to see rain, just becoming a little bit more scattered showers as we move more inland. But in the afternoon, we are going to see the potential for some isolated thunderstorms in the central and eastern parts of the interior. As we move up to the Brooks Range, going to transition back over to a rain and snow mix with areas in the highest locations along the Brooks Range just being snow. But as we Move down to the north slope, we're going to see that rain and snow mix there as well. And then as we move out west, a little bit warmer there, going to see some rain around the Point Hope area, dropping down through the Bering Strait area towards St. Lawrence Island. You can really see here on Wednesday that northerly flow just pushing through the area there is bringing that high surf advisory criteria for Diomede and that northeastern side of St. Lawrence Island. As we move down to the rest of the coastline, we are going to get down here to the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula with that northerly flow bringing showers to the area, primarily on the Bering side in that northerly flow, but we're also going to see those out by the Pribilof Islands. High pressure remaining over the central and western Aleutian Islands, going to continue to have fog out there, extending out into the central Aleutians. On Thursday, that high pressure is now pushed off to the south, and we have a new low coming in, bringing rain again to the western Aleutian Islands. Some isolated rain showers out over the central Bering down into the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula with that continued northerly flow out there. And along the coastline from Nunavut Island up towards St. Lawrence Island, going to see some showers over that area as well. Along the Arctic coastline, finally going to get warm enough on Thursday where we're going to see rain again along the north slope down in through the Brooks Range and western parts of the interior. Central interior should remain relatively dry on Thursday, but as we get further out to the east, going to see some showers creeping up over there as well. And then down through the southwestern part of the state, through the south central, with our lows still remaining here by Kodiak Island, only slowly moving to the north towards the Barren Islands. We're going to see a lot of rain still continuing there, especially along the North Gulf Coast into the Panhandle area all day on Thursday, with trough pushing through the eastern part of the Gulf there, bringing even more rain to the area. Taking a look now at temperatures as of 3 p.m. this afternoon. In the upper 50s in northern locations of the Panhandle, but getting up to as high as 70 degrees as we get to the southern area of the Panhandle, with Ketchikan being the warmest there at 70 degrees. Yakutat 63. Areas around the Gulf coastline in the mid-50s for the south central area, but as we get closer towards the Cook Inlet corridor there, we do have temperatures right around 60 degrees, with Palmer up to 61 this afternoon. In the Copper River Basin area, Glen Allen seeing 54 this afternoon. Moving up into the interior, mid-40s up to the upper to mid-50s, with the warmest being out there by Eagle, 60 degrees out there. Going through the pass, dropping all the way down to 33 degrees this afternoon, and then mid-30s along the North Slope coastline. Down in the Kotzebue Sound area, we do have temperatures in the mid to upper 40s, lower to mid-50s in the Norton Sound area, with Gamble there at 45 degrees this afternoon. For the southwest part of the state, starting in the YK Delta area, mid-50s there. The lower to mid-50s for much of the Bristol Bay area. A few places staying in the upper 40s, however. And then down in the Alaska Peninsula, lower to mid-50s there. And then all throughout the Aleutian Islands in the lower 50s. Pribilof seeing the same, 52 at both St. Paul and St. George. For our lows tonight, dropping down to the mid-40s for Pribilof Islands, mid to upper 40s all throughout the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula. Mid-40s to the lower 50s. Iliamna staying a little bit warmer there in the Bristol Bay area. And then in the YK Delta area, as we get closer to the Norton Sound, it's going to stay closer to the upper 30s to right around 40, but lower 40s as we get closer to the Kuskokwim Delta area. Seward Peninsula, mid to upper 30s. Gamble, a little bit warmer, 43 degrees for a low tonight. Then all the way up along the Arctic coastline, dropping down to right around freezing, but should all stay above freezing until we get into the Brooks Range, where through the pass, dropping down all the way to 23 degrees. Through most of the central and eastern interior, we are going to see temperatures in the mid-40s getting up to around 50 degrees. Fairbanks only dropping down to 50. And then down in the south central part of the state, interior locations, mid-40s. But as we get along the coastline, seeing temperatures closer to 50s for the low tonight. 51 for Kodiak Island. In the upper parts of the Panhandle area, lower 50s. But as we drop down further to the south, mid to upper 50s for lows tonight. Highs for tomorrow, all in the upper 50s for the Panhandle area, 56 for Yakutat area, getting up to around 60 degrees. As we move to the south central, Cordova going to stay a little bit colder, only getting up to 52 degrees tomorrow, 56 for Kodiak. In the central and eastern interior, in the upper 50s to lower 60s, with Fairbanks getting the warmest there, 63 degrees, Delta Junction 62. Western part of the interior, however, staying a little bit colder there. Galena only getting up to 43 for a high tomorrow. Ambler 44 degrees. Up along the Arctic coast, we are going to see temperatures in the mid to upper 30s for the most part. And then warmer as we get back towards the Kotzebue Sound area. Kotzebue itself, 45 degrees for a high tomorrow. Mid-40s as we get into the Norton Sound area. Gamble getting up to 45 degrees tomorrow. Mid-40s to lower 50s for the YK Delta area. Mid-50s for much of the Bristol Bay area. Dillingham 53 degrees for a high tomorrow. Lower to mid-50s in the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian Islands, and similarly out for the remainder of the Aleutians out towards Shimia there. 55 for a high tomorrow. 51 for St. Paul. Changing gears to the aviation side of the forecast, out over the Bering Sea, especially central and western areas underneath the effects of that high pressure. A lot of MVFR conditions out there. MVFR and IFR conditions up along the Arctic coastline. More IFR conditions as we get closer to the Brooks Range. Through much of the central interior, through the Bristol Bay area, seeing MVFR conditions there. And MVFR and isolated areas of IFR all along the Gulf coastline with that constant flow of rain that we are seeing out there for tomorrow morning. And then IFR conditions up by the Haines area. For the afternoon, going to continue to see those IFR conditions in the more interior locations of the Panhandle, MVFR conditions otherwise, and MVFR and IFR along the North Gulf Coast. Continued MVFR conditions from the Bristol Bay area now through the western interior up to the northern interior with some isolated areas of IFR as we get closer towards the North Slope area, and more MVFR conditions further out to the west. So go down the west coast of the state, MVFR conditions expected, and then all throughout the Bering Sea, primarily MVFR with some more IFR locations out by the Pribilof Islands. For our passes starting up north, Anactivik Pass should be IFR throughout the day tomorrow, as well as Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill will both start off IFR but improve to marginal conditions later in the day. Rainy Pass should be marginal throughout the day, whereas Windy Pass will also be MVFR for tomorrow. Isabel will start off MVFR but improve to VFR conditions, whereas Mentasta will remain VFR throughout the day. Tenino will be MVFR improving to VFR, whereas Portage will stay down in IFR conditions all day tomorrow. Chilkoot and White also going to be down in IFR conditions as we saw on the flight level charts. Taking a look at our freezing levels, we can see up north we do have surface freezing levels all throughout the Brooks Range there, which is why we're seeing so much of that snow up there. Colder air coming in from the north with the high pressure up to the northwest, bringing in that northerly flow to the area. A little bit warmer as we get into southern parts of the Bering Sea. You can see we have 10,000 feet for freezing levels out by the western Aleutian Islands, a lot warmer out there. Taking a look at icing for tomorrow in an area from St. Matthew Island down through the Pribilof Islands, between 6,000 and 9,000 feet expected. Looking out over the main part of the state, it follows our old frontal system from the Kodiak Island area, Bristol Bay area, 6,000 to 10,000 feet there, extending all the way up through the central and eastern parts of the interior, and then down in the southeast part of the state between 5,000 and 9,000 feet expected there. As we look at our jet stream, we do have flow coming in from this 110 knot jet far to the south, dropping down to 75 knots, but staying just to the east of the Panhandle out of that southerly direction, and then swinging in over the eastern part of the state, southerly flow around 80 knots there. On the other side of the state, however, we're seeing northerly flow around 60 knots following down the west coast of the state through the eastern part of the Bering Sea. And then over the western part of the Bering Sea, we do have a little jet streak there, 60 knots out of that northerly direction, meeting up with our main core of the jet that's south of the Aleutian Islands. Taking a look at 9,000 feet, a northerly flow throughout the Bering Sea with our weakest winds 15 to 20 knots over the western locations, but as we get closer to our low pressure system, getting up to as high as 40 knots as we go over the Alaska Peninsula. Looking at our main low here, we do have some stronger flow on the eastern side of this as well, 30 to 35 knots coming out of that southerly direction along the North Gulf Coast. But as we move out over mainland Alaska, easterly flow 15 to 20 knots for the most part till we get way up along the Arctic coastline up to as high as 25 knots there. And down over the Panhandle area, southerly flow 25 to 30 knots, increasing as we get into Canada area there around 35 knots. Down to 3,000 feet, we're going to see continued southerly flow over the Panhandle area, 20 to 25 knots, again picking up as we get inland around 35 knots there, becoming easterly flow out over the state, 25 to as high as 35 knots over areas of the interior out of that easterly direction. And then along the Arctic coastline, strongest winds up there, 45 knots out of that east to northeast direction, and then veering to the south, coming through the Bering Strait area around 40 knots, and then down through The central and eastern Bering Sea as high as 40 knots there. Again, strongest right over here over the Alaska Peninsula area, and dropping down as we get further off to the west. There's still somewhat of a northerly flow, becoming more westerly and only around 10 to 20 knots way out west. For our turbulence, we do have those stronger winds coming over the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian Islands, below 4,000 feet expected there. St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait and western parts of the Brooks Range below 4,000 feet, and just to the south of the central and eastern parts of the Brooks Range below 6,000 feet expected there. And for the Prince William Sound area, extending out towards the Anchorage area below 6,000 feet also for that area. We'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
It's a complicated project, but a simple life. You can study whales all over the world, you can study harbor seals all over the world, but you cannot study them in silence all over the world. So we really need this sort of piece of wilderness, this untrammeled wilderness, as they say, in order to answer some of these questions.
So we've been monitoring underwater sound here in Glacier Bay since May of 2000. And the reason why we're doing that is to understand what the park is like from the perspective of a marine mammal, because marine mammals are very dependent on the natural sound environment.
If you sort of bring it back to humans, humans respond to noise in very stereotypical ways, and other mammals do the same thing. So, you know, if you go to a concert with your buddy and the music's really loud, you're going to talk at a higher pitch. You're going to talk louder, and you might have to repeat yourself. And marine mammals do the same thing if it gets noisy. So we're seeing, you know, just which of those three that they actually do. We're here on Strawberry Island for the entire summer.
We sample 8 to 12 hours a day. There'll be 2 people who are on our beach station doing scans, marking each whale in the area, 2 people who are doing focal follows from our tower, which is a temporary tower that we have set up here on Strawberry Island. And then we have 2 people who are in the kayak who are doing fine scale acoustic sampling for harbor seals. Got a harbor seal at 23 meters.
Got it? What's our bearing?
Bearing is 5822121.
Being able to pair what an animal is saying with where the animal is saying it is an amazing data set. It's a hard data set to get. It takes a lot of work, but it can answer so many questions.
So our cruise ship right here in the background is right on time today. We have a blissful hour and a half before the cruise ship gets here where we can watch our whales in silence, and then our ship comes in, bringing with it the noise that it brings, and we watch our whales while the ship's here to see whether or not their behavior is changing. And then it's going to go up bay and bring passengers to go see the glaciers, and we are going to get that blissful quiet again to see whether or not our whales are going back to that natural behavior.
This is the computer that runs our underwater acoustic monitoring. And there's a 5-mile cable from my office that leads out to a hydrophone that's out recording live sounds in Glacier Bay. And if I turn this up a little bit louder for the moment, that's the sound of a male harbor seal roaring because it's the mating season.
Strawberry Island. Building a good field team and building some good camaraderie is really important. We have sort of these daily routines of things that we do together. So there's a schedule that we check every morning, who's gonna cook lunch that day, who's gonna cook dinner. And then every day we take a group photo. And then every day we do a daily check-in. We talk about what worked that day, what didn't work that day, and what we learned either from the island or from each other over the course of the day. Surface 900600.
Last night, there were anywhere from 8 to 10 individuals right along the kelp bed off the point. We were trying to figure out exactly what they were doing. So as acousticians, Michelle and I got a hydrophone.
That seemed like the right thing to do.
Put the hydrophone in the water to see what was going on. Well, we dropped the hydrophone and it was so quiet. There was not a single roar.
Nothing. We heard
It was
nothing.
just so unusual.
One of the things we did observe yesterday was 2 large bull killer whales who had come into the area that we learned today were transient killer whales. They do come into this area to hunt harbor seals. This is a pupping ground. That's what they come in for.
Yep.
We cannot in any way, shape, or form definitively link the presence of mammal-eating killer whales with the silence of harbor seals.
No, but it is quite interesting that they happened at the exact same time. It's always an adventure on Strawberry Island. You never know what the day's going to bring.
This morning at 5:15 in the morning, the area was just boiling with whales. I had one 15-minute scan this morning where I was literally hopping back and forth on either side of the theodolite, calling out numbers to try and get all the whales as quickly as possible. And then 15 minutes later, we couldn't find them. Aside from getting to be outside all the time, my favorite part of doing my PhD is getting to work with Leanna.
It goes both ways.
It helps when you put 2 minds that think differently onto the same problem.
Global ocean noise is a real problem, and there are areas of the ocean that have underwater sound from vessels so often that you could almost consider it an urban environment. Glacier Bay is a very remote area, and it was set aside as a national park in part to do scientific research. And we're privileged to be able to use it as a natural laboratory where we can better understand the impacts of underwater noise.
There are some places that act like characters in your life, and I think that a lot of Alaskans can resonate with the fact that living here is like having another family member. It's like having somebody really, really important who's sort of nudging you to be a little uncomfortable all the time and to stretch yourself all the time because it's worth it. I've lived here for almost 10 years. I've made Alaska my home, and so I'm an Alaskan by choice.
Welcome back. We'll start off with a very quick look at the ice edge. Still not near the coastline, but we do have warm enough sea surface temperatures out there that ice is still melting. And over on the western part again, very far off of the Arctic coastline at this time. So taking a quick look here now at the Marines, we will say that if you missed us yesterday, these are some new marine charts that we're looking at here. Most of the arrows and the numbers are going to be the same from what you're used to seeing, but we do have some new overlays to help give us some extra information. The black arrows there are wind speeds. The longer they are, the stronger they are. And then the image itself, the colored image back there, is actually sea height, so we can see fetch coming in, and you notice these higher colors there with the higher numbers with 13 feet for seas, and as we get more to these purples, around 10 feet in the eastern part of the Gulf. Otherwise, our Marines, we do have flow out of a southerly direction in the Gulf that is getting higher as we get further to the north, up to as high as 30 knots in the very northern parts of the Gulf of Alaska, and then southeast to southerly flow in the inside waters, 20 to 30 feet, highest as we get further to the north. Then on Thursday, southerly flow again, 25 to 30 knots in the inside waters. Southerly flow out over the Gulf as well, 20 knots in northern locations and up to as high as 25 as we get further off to the east. On Wednesday, out over the south central Cook Inlet area, northeasterly flow, 20 to 25 knots there. Then we have easterly flow out over much of the Gulf as well, 25 to 30 knots, and you can see these higher seas coming in towards Hinchinbrook entrance area, 13 to 14 feet for seas there. But as we get into Prince William Sound, easterly flow 25 knots, seas only as high as 6 feet in there. Then on Thursday, going to have a more southerly component to the winds out over the northern part of the Gulf, around 20 knots. Easterly flow in Prince William Sound, 20 knots there as well. And you can see where our low is out over here as we have flow circulating around the low, first northerly and then becoming more westerly, around 20 knots circulating around that low pressure system on Thursday. Northern part of Cook Inlet, northeasterly flow, 15 knots there. For Wednesday, for the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island areas, we have primarily northwesterly flow, 25 to 35 knots, strongest as we get further out towards the west. And then the exception here is Shelikof Strait, northeasterly flow, 15 knots there. On Thursday, all flow becoming more westerly, 20 to 25 knots. Seas highest on the southern part of Kodiak Island, 8 to 9 feet there. For the Aleutian Islands, primarily northerly flow, a little bit northwesterly for the central and eastern Aleutian Islands, 25 to 30 knots there. Highest seas on the Bering side up to as high as 11 feet. And then out for the western Aleutian Islands, northwesterly flow 10 to 20 knots there, seas only 4 to 5 feet. On Thursday, southwesterly flow 15 knots for the western Aleutian Islands. For the central and eastern Aleutian Islands, a westerly flow there, 20 knots expected. Wednesday for the west coast of the state, northerly flow as high as 35 knots, moving past St. Lawrence Island and then south of Nunavik Island. And then on Thursday, becoming weaker and a little bit more northwesterly, as low as 10 knots closer toward the Pribilof Islands, but as high as 30 knots around Nunavik Island. And here we can see for the Arctic coastline, northeasterly flow 25 knots out by the Beaufort Sea, dropping down to 15 by Barrow, and then up to as high as 30 knots on the northern side of the Seward Peninsula. But as we get through the Bering Strait area, you can see these higher colors with the deeper purples there, with the higher seas 10 feet pushing through Diomede and the northeastern side of St. Lawrence Island, where we have that high surf advisory out. But as we move into Thursday, you can see it be the lighter purples with the lower sea heights, and less of that fetch pushing through here as some of the winds start to die down a little bit, but still 25 knots out of a north to northeasterly direction and 25 knots out of an easterly direction along the Arctic coastline. As we look at our weather recap, starting way out west, high pressure out over the western Aleutian Islands with some fog underneath that. Northerly flow for the Bering Sea, going to bring in some showers to the Alaska Peninsula tonight, with our main low pressure system out by Kodiak Island, with southerly flow bringing in rain all the way along the North Gulf Coast, including the Panhandle area with some steady rain there as well. But as we move to more interior locations, more scattered showers are expected, and that does include areas from the Bristol Bay area up through the central interior. But as we get along the Arctic coastline, going to transition over to snow with the colder temperatures up there. For Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.